The 90s, the way you remember them, 99.9 KZXX, and that was from Sick Puppy's demo album, a tune called Catch 22. What's good, everybody? It's your buddy, Drew Stoffleys, and how did I come to Shaman's Harvest being this week's sounds similar to artists where they wouldn't even be featured this week? Well, here's how I came to that. I was talking to Wicked Purple and Nathan a couple weeks ago on some suggestions for a future Lockdown Hoedown, and Nathan said he'd been listening to a lot of Shaman's Harvest as of late. Well, they got together back in the late 90s, didn't really release any albums till the 2000s, and I think their first real big hit was in 2009, their tune Dragonfly. Well, I decided to see if there were any bands from the 90s that could be linked up to Shaman's Harvest, so I fired up the Google box, went over to Last FM through Google, and decided to see if there are any connections. Well, one of the bands that's a connection to Shaman's Harvest is Saint Asonia. Well, Saint Asonia is a super group made up of bands from Finger 11, 3 Days Grace, Stain, and a couple others. Yeah, they came out in the 2010s, yet Finger 11 and Stain came out in the 90s, so that's how we got Quicksand and Just Go on this week's episode of the Lockdown Hoedown. Well, going down the rabbit hole or wormhole, whatever you want to say, from Saint Asonia's Wikipedia page, I came to other bands that sound similar to both the bands Skillet, Seven Dust, and Sick Puppies. So that's how Bob became your uncle, and that was probably the most complicated way to explain. I found a link between Shaman's Harvest and the 5 bands we heard on the Sound Similar To section of the Lockdown Hoedown. Well, catch your breath, everybody, because coming up after the break, we're going to hear from the Smalls and the Inbreds on the 90s, the way you remember them, 99.9 KZXX.